Why did the Great Depression happen? There wasn't one specific cause of the Depression, but many factors together contributed to the crash of the stock market. The next 5 slides are 5 factors that caused the Depression.
The first factor that caused the Great Depression was that there was a small variety of goods and services offered at this time period. There were also very few investments. Prosperity depended on just a few large industries, but those industries ultimately declined. For example, the big booming industry of automobiles during the 1920s slowly decreased because almost every American had a car, making the demand for it decrease. This decrease in industries ultimately helped cause the wealth of the citizens to decline with them. Some other industries, like electronics and plastics, emerged, but they didn't have enough strength to stop the decline of the market.
Second factor of the Great Depression was that there was an uneven distribution of purchasing power, which means that only the rich could afford the products of this time period. This led to a lack in consumer demand. More than half of American families couldn't afford the goods from the economy because of their prices.
The third factor contributing to the Great Depression was bad credit structure. Farmers who were in debt didn't make a large enough profit to pay off that debt. Small banks were in trouble because the poor were unable to pay off their loans. Also, some of these banks were making unwise loans. Even after the stock market crashed, the banks kept making loans, but people couldn't pay them, leading to the failure of many American banks.
The fourth factor that caused the Great Depression was a decreased international trade. European demand for U.S. goods declined because Europe's economy was growing and didn't depend on the U.S. as much. Despite their growing economy, Europe was also having financial problems of their own. Therefore, they didn't have enough money to buy U.S. products.
The fifth factor that caused the Great Depression was debt. European nations owed the U.S. from World War I, but they couldn't repay the U.S. because of their bad economy. The U.S. just kept loaning to Europe, especially Germany, to help them out, which just led to a higher debt for the U.S. This, with the many other factors, helped produce the crash of the stock market.
What were some early attempts to combat the Great Depression? America tried to maintain a culture similar to the times before the Depression, like going to movies, listening to the radio, and other entertainment. President Hoover tried to restore public confidence in the economy. He wanted leaders of businesses to start a program of cooperation for recovery from the Depression. The president didn't want anyone to lay off workers or cut down production. Ultimately, his plan failed. Hoover then tried to use government spending to fight the Depression, but this too wasn't enough to face the major economic problems. Therefore, he worked on keeping a balanced budget.
There was a bad agricultural economy during the Great Depression, so Hoover made the Agricultural Marketing Act, which raised the tariffs and also helped farmers maintain prices. This was also a failure, and it ultimately did not help combat the Great Depression. Hoover also established a bad Reconstruction Finance Corporation, also known as the RFC, which was supposed to supply loans to banks, railroads, and businesses. However, this project failed too because much of the money went to the larger banks and corporations, meaning that the project ignored the smaller banks. The American people then started to blame the president for the Great Depression because none of his plans were working. There were many organizations opposing the president, such as the Farmers' Holiday Association and the Bonus Army. The Farmers' Holiday Association was basically a farmer strike, which blocked several markets from receiving farm products. The Bonus Army was a group of veterans who had a violent protest where they marched into Washington and demanded bonuses.
What are some similarities and differences between the Great Depression and the 2007-2008 recession? One of the similarities was that Presidents Obama and FDR both used public works to combat the economic difficulties, but FDR used them more. They both have similar beginnings. People went into deep debt, and people made unwise investments. Financial institutions failed, which caused stocks to crash. Unlike the Depression, we mainly use bailouts to help the recession, which is when the government gives money to businesses and banks to save them.
The recovery is different because the Great Depression was resolved by World War II, but the recession just had to rely on Obama's long-lasting stimulus plan. In the Great Depression, unemployment was 25%, and during the recession, it was 8.5%. In the Great Depression, the increase in money given by the Federal Reserve was 17%, while in the 2007-2008 recession, it was 125%. Not as many banks failed in the recent recession as in the Great Depression, where 50% of banks failed.
What was the New Deal? The New Deal was a series of acts and laws that FDR and Congress passed to try to cure the Great Depression. This plan was based on the 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. The New Deal was attacked by the American public, and later on, Roosevelt issued a second New Deal. Overall, the New Deal drastically altered the way America deals with its financial problems. In the next slides, we explain some of FDR's New Deal programs.
The Civilian Conservation Corps, known as the CCC, created camps and forests which provided jobs for unemployed young men. Their jobs included things such as planting trees, building reservoirs, developing parks, and improving agricultural irrigation. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration, known as the FERA, gave cash grants to state relief agencies. When the FERA grants weren't enough, a second program, the Civil Works Administration, was produced to help. Harry Hopkins was part of the Works Progress Administration, known as the WPA, which gave jobs to people by building public buildings, airports, roads, and bridges.
The Agricultural Adjustment Administration was an organization to help farmers by bringing a rise in prices for their goods. Other organizations then stemmed from the AAA. The Tennessee Valley Authority was an experiment to create electric power. Because of the greater amount of electrical power, the prices for electricity decreased. The National Recovery Act, or the NRA, gave a minimum wage and abolished child labor.
Another important project of the New Deal was the Social Security Act. The Social Security Act gave insurance to the unemployed and federal aid to people with disabilities, the elderly, and dependent children. The elderly could receive $15 a month if they were presently destitute, or they could use the pension system. The pension system was a system in which employers would, through a payroll tax where they would withhold money from their employees' salary, contribute to their employees' retirement income. Although the Social Security Act excluded large categories of workers, such as domestic servants and agricultural laborers, it paved the way for later Social Security programs.
Comparing and contrasting the New Deal to the stimulus package. The similarity between the New Deal and the stimulus package was the elderly. The stimulus plan eliminated taxes for senior citizens, and the New Deal gave direct assistance to the elderly through the Social Security Act, which provided them with money. Both plans wanted to create jobs. Obama spent a lot of money for contracts, grants, and loans to create jobs. Roosevelt had his public works programs, such as the CCC and WPA, to create jobs.
plans wanted to have more government influence in private businesses. The New Deal emphasized reform and the government for the nation. It was a victory for progressives. The Recovery Act for the recession of 2007 and 2008 worked for a new clean energy economy, reconstructed infrastructure and technology, and more competition for America. The New Deal set a permanent structure for the future, while the stimulus plan was more of a short-term fix for the economy.
Another similarity between the New Deal and the stimulus package is that both plans were rooted in the idea that when there is an economic collapse, the government can stimulate economic growth and employment through government spending. Both plans were making up for the defects of the previous presidential administrations, Hoover and Bush. The government put a lot of money in the banks for both plans because there were defaults and loans.
Overall, the Great Depression was the worst economic hardship in United States history. Several banks collapsed and many Americans were jobless. It was a very rough time for America. However, the projects of the New Deal that were used to combat the Depression gave a foundation for future advancements in economic plans. President Obama was also faced with the challenge of fighting a recession. Like the Great Depression, banks failed because of loans and people became unemployed. He put large amounts of money into his recovery plan, but there are still unanswered problems that the American economy is facing today.